But I feel into it, and I feel into this idea that the spirit of water, if we really feel into it, for me, is condensed light. Because if we are containers, if every life form is a container of life, and if we have a spirit or a soul, that spirit soul is held very carefully within this container of life. Since water is a container of photonic light, if water was the holy grail, then the contents of that grail would be light. And I really think that the relationship between light, vibration, and water are where all the answers to all the mysteries lie.
Veda Austin, welcome on Just Tap In. Before I even ask you the first question, we just did a beautiful prayer intention setting with our waters. So I wanted to give a big cheers. We haven't drank these yet, but to begin, cheers with these beautiful, highly charged bottles of intention water.
Absolutely.
And the first question I wanted to ask you is, what are you most excited about right now in your life?
Oh my goodness, so many things I am excited and grateful for. Very excited my new book is out. That's been a decade's worth of work. And it being actually available for people makes such a difference to me, because it's suddenly people are able to see how I think. They're able to see all of the work for themselves and show their friends and family. And I think even more importantly, well, on equal par at least, it's for the children as well that come through, because such a lot of my work has been inspired by my children and other people's children, because they're the wisdom keepers, the water bearers of the future, and they have so much to teach us. So the other things are my tours. I'm doing in-person tours throughout the UK and next year throughout the States, and being able to go and meet people in person and give them hugs. And it's very humbling seeing how much my work has impacted people. That makes me really, really happy. And I'm excited about doing this talk with you. It's all about being in the moment as well. So I'm happy that the sun is shining. It's been raining so much in New Zealand. I always appreciate the rain, but it also helps us appreciate the sun. And I think that I spend my life in a daily kind of attitude of gratitude, that the best that I can. So, I'm excited about the things that are coming up in the future, but even down to the little things, like waking up and looking at the dew on the grass, that makes me thrilled just to be here.
It's beautiful you mentioned how your work went from online to now it's going into the offline world, into more of the physical dimension. And I was curious to know, what is the number one recurring thing that, as you start to begin meeting people in the 3D, what is the number one thing that they keep telling you about what their work has done in their life?
I would say, although they do vary, that the number one thing is probably that they don't see water the same, and they don't see themselves the same way anymore, and that they have become much more mindful of their own power to connect with this divine source that is water, that is within them and without them. That's very much in a nutshell what people tell me, that through a visual, artistic expression in many ways, which is how water works in this field of crystallography with me, through one picture, they are able to feel so much. And then by learning my freezing method and seeing it for themselves, their entire relationship with this life force energy that we call water has changed. And it gives them hope and in a world where so many people really crave that, because although I'm diverting very slightly from what they might have told me, I really think that when you look into these different tributaries of water, when you study water in all these different ways, I mean, I've been doing it every single day for 10 years, then you can't help but see that water is taking you somewhere. Water is telling you something. Water is answering questions to things that you thought water couldn't even answer questions about, like math or like like oh goodness, emotions or um, even the financial stuff. I mean, you'd think they have nothing to do with it, but wherever you go, water takes you on a journey. And that journey always ends up making sense. So when you find something that wherever you look, there is this depth, there is more and more depth, but somehow, somewhere in there, there is a truth, then I think you're looking at a universal truth. And that is something we need, I believe, especially right now, because a universal truth is one of those rare and beautiful things that doesn't have any masks. It's transparent and it's non-judgmental. And this is the lifeblood of our planet, of us and all life. So I think it's a very, very worthwhile thing to consider, to think about, to talk about, to share about. So I think people are inspired by the way that the water speaks to me through pictures, and I hope by the way that I explain things in simple ways and with a lot of analogies.
Mm. And in this, spiritual consciousness community, the question that keeps coming up for people is, when are we going to have disclosure? When are, the extraterrestrials going to come down and connect with us? But the more I've learned about water from you, it's, this question came up is water the actual extraterrestrial alien race, advanced consciousness living amongst us right now and co-creating with us as a species?
I mean, it's a huge topic and question of which I don't have all the answers. I tend to speak from my experience, from what I've seen, what I've thought, the conclusions I've come to based off such a lot of observation. And the one thing that I would say about that is that where there is life, whatever that life might look like in its container, there is water. And there's no mistake about that. And the water that we've just blessed and that we are drinking has been through the clouds, the earth, the trees, the animals. It's been through our ancestors, whoever they might be, because there's probably been some lost record somewhere along the line. We can't trace our ancestors back to the very, very beginning. Not yet. And maybe in the case of water, you look at that and it doesn't die. There is no death in the realm of water. It evaporates, it goes back through these reincarnations over and over and over again. So the water that you are drinking could have come from anywhere. The science is out as to whether water came from other planets or meteorites, asteroids, which is one of the common ideals, or that it perhaps came from the inner Earth, from within the Earth's mantle, where the water is held in ringwoodite, called primary water. And there's more of that water inside the Earth's mantle than all of the waters in the seas on the surface of Earth. So the consensus is more that perhaps there's a bit of both. And if you consider that if it did come from different meteorites and asteroids and hit different places of the Earth, it probably came from different places, which would give it different energies, which would be very, very interesting because you start thinking, well, why do these bodies of water have different energies that we can feel? But then it would have gone up, it would have, evaporated, it would come through. Eventually, it's going to come into us as bodies of water that need water to survive because we excrete water. So there is this constant information exchange of water coming into us, being experienced by us in this body of water, and then released from us. So within all of that, the concept or the idea that water has been within any living body, whether that be deemed as extraterrestrial or terrestrial, it makes sense. Why wouldn't that be the case? And water in its varied stages, it doesn't have to be a liquid. It could be a plasma, it can be all these different phases. So within those contexts, I think that life and water go together, no matter what that life form is. And the universe is made up of hydrogen, and hydrogen means the creator of water. And it's the hydro is water and gen is Genesis. So it's this water creator. So water is seeding itself throughout the universe constantly. There are even entire water planets that are all like mostly water. And so these ideas that we are the only water planet is that's actually not true. There are water planets out there. And it's no coincidence that when we are looking for life, we're looking for water on other planets. But perhaps it's that life doesn't just appear in the liquid water stage. I think this plasma aspect is extremely important to consider. And liquid crystal, that's the way of the future, I believe.
Mm.
That's the stage of water where I freeze it for my technique.
Beautiful, because on this show previously we've had people that have conversations with God, with spirit guides, with archangels, from everything that you could think of or imagine. And here you are having conversations directly with water, and you are creating a whole method and process of communicating and getting messages, almost like if I were to type into ChatGPT or like any AI, language model, a question and it gets back to me. Water does the same thing. And you've discovered this with the way and the questions you've asked it. So for example, you asked water, can you show me life, what life looks like on other planets? And then you're getting back imagery. Tell us a little bit of what that process has been like to create a conscious, intelligent communication between yourself and the water that you've been measuring and documenting.
Well, it's a relationship, as in all things. I think I'm very fortunate to see things I've always seen things from a slightly different perspective. So my father is native New Zealand Maori, so there is a very strong relationship with these concepts that water isn't just a resource, it's a relative. And that we are the caretakers or the kaitiaki of the water, the lakes, the oceans, the streams, the tributaries, and that water stores and holds information from our ancestors, whoever they were. And so this idea, there's even a saying that essentially says in English that the health of the river reflects the health of the people, and that the other one is I am the river and the river is me. So there's these ideas that there is no separation. However, I've also been a very philosophical person my whole life and looked into all different kinds of ways that people believe in deep philosophies, which led me to never really look at things in a very typical way. So when it came to water and having conversations with water, it all happened extremely organically. I never expected in a million years that I would be doing this. If you asked me 20 years ago, I'd be like, what are you talking about? So I think because of the way it happened, and I'm happy to share that, which will give some context into relationship, was that I had had a healing experience after a bad car accident with a beautiful natural water here in New Zealand. And what happened was I started looking at an analysis, thinking, why is it so healing? How did it purge me like it did? And when you look at an analysis of water, what you're reading is what water holds, not what water is. So then you go to the science. Well, what is water? And the scientists will tell you it's H2O. It's two hydrogens and an oxygen. But that never felt like enough. So then someone else said something to me once, which led me down a whole another tributary, and that was that the two hydrogens are feminine in the mode of levity, and the large oxygen is masculine in the mode of gravity, and together they create balance and liquid water on the surface of Earth, which I loved. Which then led me on to question things a little more. And when you look at Tesla's work, it's like, you want to know the secrets to the universe, look at frequency, energy, and vibration. I'm like, well, how can I know that about water? And so I started researching. And when I found Emoto's work, which wasn't embraced by the scientific community, however, in a similar way to my work, his pictures helped people to see that they are bodies of water, sensitive to thoughts and sounds, environment, music, all these kinds of things. And it just impacted so many people, because the saying, a picture speaks 1,000 words, is very, very true. And water has a lot to say. And then there was a man called Laurent Costa. Laurent is still with us, and he is a French microscopic photographer. And he was seeing not just geometries like Emoto, but he was seeing actual art. So
Smiley faces.
smiley faces. He would smile at the water sometimes and see smiley faces in the ice. So that really inspired me, because art is a sophisticated form of language. It is a way, and it's very human-like in many ways, not to take away from the rest of the entire natural world, which of course is intelligent. But we have, as a species, taken our thoughts and written them down and drawn them and drawn what we see. So for archaeology, that's been extremely helpful, getting to know what people were focused on back in those old days. So seeing actual art and ice, you can't help but smile when you see these little smiley faces. And I was like, his work is inspiring to me. And then there was Thomas Hieronymus. I kind of love his name. And he was a radionic engineer. And he went into this Parisian meat market on a very cold, frosty day. And he noticed that the freshly placed organs of an animal seemed to be affecting the way the frost froze on the glass behind where they were placed. So the frost would freeze into the shape of a liver organ above the liver organ, and above, like a heart above a heart. And he put that down to there being water in the blood, and that water is always in communion with itself in all its different phases, because we don't realize or think that there is water in the air. The fact that we breathe out means there is. And he was suggesting that because each organ has something called a sonic signature, which is like a cymatic imprint for form and function, that information was being shared to the water in the air, which was collected, and then when it hit the mirror or the glass, it took on the form. So the information became in form, which is what I see in my work all the time. So that inspired me, because he was seeing it with his naked eye. And I thought, well, 10 years ago, I didn't have a microscope. I was working on another project, though, so I had a glass petri dish. And so I thought, well, I'm going to go put all of these inspirational people's work together. I'm going to put some water in my dish, and I'm going to project a thought into it. I'm going to put it into my freezer with the peas and broccoli and see what happens. No attachment whatsoever to whatever the outcome might be. And then hours later, I pulled it out, held it up to the light, and there was this incredible hand imprinted in the ice. And it took up half the dish, and it was an undeniable hand that looks like an X-ray of a hand. And I'll be happy to show you what these pictures look like soon. But to say that was expected, I would definitely didn't expect it. I was a little freaked out when I first saw it because I was not expecting it. It was so clear. And the next thought I had, well, was it a coincidence? So then I went to the ocean. I got some seawater, froze a thin layer, tentatively stood outside the freezer, thinking, God, if I see something relative to the ocean, then maybe this isn't random. And then the image I got in the ice was of a clear fish with scales and fins and a perfectly round eye and tail. And that led on. And for a year, I did this work where I was seeing imagery. And I would say that as my development of understanding the stages, the phases, the science even of water, the new science of water, which talks about the fourth phase of water, that led me on to starting to see water in another way. So for an entire year, 10 years ago, I froze water solid, and I haven't done that in 9 years. I started to read that fourth phase water, or this more plasma-like water, which has a negative charge. It's more molecularly ordered. It absorbs more light, which is such an important piece. And I know this is a long way of saying what my connection with water is and how that happened. But it was a slow development. It was organic. It was a relationship. And so I think that from there, I started to pull my dish out earlier and earlier. And then I finally saw it about 5 minutes and 20 seconds. There was liquid on top and ice underneath. Because fourth phase water builds in the freezing, but before frozen stage, and also in the melting stage. It's the in-between stages where you see subtle information. It's where the secrets to life are held. And then I then took it out and I tipped the liquid away. And when you do that, you have then got a liquid crystal. And it's called a crystal because it's more molecularly ordered similarly to a crystal. But from doing that, I saw a quantum leap of imagery on such a fine layer of ice is designed so much information. And my work for that first year seemed so kind of covered over by layers of ice now that I see it. It's a miracle I saw the work I did compared to now. It's such a short, easy thing to do. I think when I started to see water responding to me, because I became more and more curious, like, oh, what if I ask water questions? I mean, that seems so crazy within the scientific world. Like, who is this woman? Because I like to be a bridge. I don't want to get too far one way and too far another way. If water really wants to be taken seriously, somewhere in this, there has to be balance. So I want
The in
to,
between.
yeah, so I want to address, at least to the best of my ability, some of the science. I'm an artist. I worked professionally as an oil painter for years, but I'm also a researcher. I was studying to become an archaeologist. So, this is, again, just I never expected to be studying water. So then we have the art of water, and I say that art is the heart of water. And then we have something that I call hydroglyphs, and these are the three things that ways in which water shares information that I've discovered along my journey. And hydroglyphs are symbols in ice. I have to have seen repeat at least 50 times to say I have one. And I use words as an influence, and not just English, the same word in many, many languages to see if we see the same symbol. Essentially, this is giving us a Rosetta Stone in many ways of being able to understand what water, the true messages in water are for each and every person, and each and every life force or life form. So it could easily be a communication system for everything. It's a big deal. And I digress. So when I was asking water, one of the questions I asked is, do you know my name? And, I go into this, and I think it's important for people to know, is like I go into this often not knowing what water will do. So, I know my name. Uh, Obviously, I know that much, but I'm like, well, I thought, well, I don't know if water can do this.
Yeah. Does
Like,
water know me like that? We'll see. We'll see.
something like that. I don't know. Is it going to be really practical or what? So wasn't projecting what I would see. I mean, I thought, well, it would be cool, but I don't know what it will do. And so I asked the question and I froze it, pulled it out, and in the eyes were my initials that were linked exactly like I link my initials um, uh, in real life. So like a V and an A. And they were so accurate, it was uncanny. And I've repeated that, and I keep seeing this VA. I would say that water is not a photocopier. I've observed that, and I think that's really, really important. It's not a photocopier. It's not showing you exact replicas of what you showed it. It's showing you an artistic rendition.
It's
So
an
it's
artist.
it's an artist. It's the ultimate artist and architect of life. And so that was a big surprise. But someone once asked me, why don't you ask water if you can trick it? Can you deceive water? And that was earlier on before I had really developed this intimate relationship in the way that I feel that I have. And that is where I'm like, okay, well, let me see. I'll give it a go. You never know. And so I so I did this thing where I said to the water, Joe, can you share something just between me and you that is just so beautiful that I'll never forget, that's something like really special, and I won't share it. It'll just be kept in a special place. I won't share it. And I immediately froze it because I was lying. I was at the minimum going to share it to the person, but I was probably going to share it on social media. And then I started to feel guiltier and guiltier because it's not my nature to do things like that. And I felt so bad. I was feeling worse and worse. And I'm like, I was using spring water at the time, and spring water has a signature pattern of a beautiful hexagon. And so I'm like, oh, it's probably going to be disordered. Oh God, what is probably not happy at all. And so I pulled it out at the stage of where I'd pull it out, and there was some disorder, but there was the most clear message, I think, that really made me realize that I was not working with a substance that people think water is. There's an intelligence here by this answer that I got. In letters, I got a very large N-O, like a big
Yep.
no. And after seeing that, I'm like, I am never doing that again, because it took a week before water would play with me in those realms again.
Oh
And
wow. So it like stopped giving you answers after you tried to deceive it for a while.
it did. It stopped.
Wow.
And I thought, oh my God, I've blown it. And I felt so bad. And
My research is done.
I'm done. But I think that's a really important piece, because it shows that this isn't just like something that you can program. I hear that word with water all the time. I'm going to program the water so it does what I want. I think one of the most important things that I have learned with this work is about relationship. And this comes from ancient and indigenous wisdom as well, whereby the way I approach this work, I give this analogy. When you go to a petting zoo or like a farm, where there's cute little animals and you can give them cuddles and stuff, and there's adorable little bunny rabbits and you can hug them, and there's sheep, and there's maybe deer. In New Zealand, we have a lot of deer. So you can feed them and pat them and stroke their cute little soft noses. Clearly, I've done this, and you have a lovely time, and you go away and you talk about your day and you say, that was lovely. Oh, what a lovely day. Weren't they cute? And then you go about the rest of your day, and maybe you don't think about it too much after that. And then I like you compare that to going out into the forest, and you really feel one with nature. And you really center yourself, and you really feel the smells and see the colors, and you just feel the energy of the forest as a whole. And then around the corner of a tree, maybe there's a deer, and it sees you, and you both see each other, and it doesn't run away. And there's this like feeling inside of you that goes, oh my gosh, he's going to, I think he might even come over. And then the deer, of its own will, comes over to you, and maybe you have something for it in your hand to eat, and maybe it nuzzles its soft little nose into your hand and it eats out of your hand, and it's just this thrill inside of you because it's wild, and it didn't have to come to you, and it chose to come to you, and it created such a elation inside of you because you know that. And it's so sad because we consider that something wild choosing us is such a big deal. Whereas what we tend to do is entrap things so that they can't go anywhere for our pleasure. And the only difference between those two examples is that one is wild and one is not. And I like to remind people that water is wild, and that the best relationship for me, that in my experience working with water, is to not expect water to do what you want, but to more ask the question, if this is a relationship, a loving, beautiful relationship, what we really want is to create an environment where that person or that life force energy, or that is water, can be the most themselves and free to share and be their best self that they can be, to create environments that feel safe and loving, where you can be your quirky, self, you can share who you are, don't feel judged by the fact that you don't have your makeup on, or you haven't done your hair, or you haven't like gone to the gym 5, 6, 7 times a day, or whatever. It's just you being you, and you being seen for who you truly are. And that is the way in which I see water, because I've seen that water won't do what I want all the time. Water won't design complex imagery if I'm angry or frustrated, which doesn't happen often, but I'm human and it does sometimes. And but I've seen that when I'm perhaps working on a project where I'm maybe putting flowers or something in water to see whether we'll see imagery of the flowers, but I'm genuinely sad, water won't design flowers. All day long, water will just design sad faces. It will just say sad faces, like a little
Because it's
tear.
mirroring you? Is that
Yes,
why?
it's seeing how I'm feeling. And it's shown me that it's far more interested in what I'm feeling than what I'm thinking. And then I think it comes into, well, what are we looking at within this crystallography? What is it? What are we seeing in there, really? And I think because when I would come into the topic of tap water, because tap water has been gone through so much, so many right-angled piping. It's holding all of this stuff in it. And so my work with tap water is nothing about me suggesting that people drink it. This isn't about drinking water. This is about what the tap water has shown me. And tap water has shown me some of the greatest lessons I've learnt in this field of water. Because the municipal tap water, the natural crystallography, or what I call signature pattern, is very disordered. It looks like if you imagine Legos thrown all over the floor, they haven't got structure. But then if you let that crystallography melt, and you're using the exact same water, and then, for example, you might put that melted crystallography, that water, beside your heart, so that your heart, you can literally feel your heart beating against the dish. And you do that in a very loving, intentional way for even only a minute. And then you refreeze that same water. What I consistently see is that the structures of water start to form ferns. They start to create flower-like shapes. You might even see little hexagons in there. And that shows that there is an improvement structurally. But what we're not seeing at this stage anyway is an improvement chemically. So if we're not seeing a chemical improvement, but we're seeing a structural improvement, then what is it that we're seeing? This is a really important question. And because water freezes in 3 stages until it's a solid, I look at those stages as spirit, blood, and body. This early stage of freezing is the spirit stage. It has pushed all the solates out, so it's a very clear ice, and it is underneath the liquid realm. So you need to tip that liquid off. So we're working with a liquid crystal stage, a spirit stage. So what I think that we're looking at is water's energetic state of health. Essentially, how it's feeling. Water can
Mm.
show you how it's feeling. So the fact that tap water, which is, to be honest, within spiritual communities, one of the ones that gets the worst rap, the most judgment, we have all of the people saying, oh God, it's polluted, it's horrible, it's dead. Water doesn't die. That's actually not a truth. It will evaporate. But people are meaning structurally dead. Yeah, it can be really, it's like more to me, it's more like it's sick. It's like if you imagine somebody who's very unwell, maybe they've been told they have a disease. Their friend or their family member comes to make them a cup of tea and give them a blankie and tell them that how are you? Give them love. They will feel better, but their doctor will probably say you're still sick. But anyone who is on a natural healing journey would probably concur that an attitude of gratitude is one of the best places to start your healing journey. And the fact that we're seeing a structural improvement or an emotional improvement, I think, is really where the healing begins. And we are bodies of water by molecular count, not by volume. We're 99% water. There are more water molecules in our bodies than stars in the Milky Way. And also, just to give people context, because some people don't realize just how many that is, there is more water molecules in our bodies than every single human being on the planet of Earth. And every one of those molecules is reading our potential. Because when I've put a seed into the water, I don't see and I remove it and freeze it, I don't see the seed represented. I see the outcome of the seed. If a sunflower seed, I see the sunflower. For an apple seed, I see the apple. For a flax seed, I see the flax pod. Water is reading our greatest potential, not our worst. It's our potential of health.
And
For
our
the
future.
And our future. It's already read that. And I don't think water's limited to time and space. It just
Mhm.
feels like that when it's within a body, especially within a human body, where we have so many fears and so many different feelings. But when we come into a more balanced and meditative space, or just clear space, that's when the water can become such a shining mirror of the divine. And I often do say that. I think that water is the house of the divine, and that where there is water, there is also spirit, or the spark of God, or universal love, whichever way you most feel comfortable with. But I think one of the greatest things I've learned is that water itself is only one part matter. The rest is photonic light. And water is a lighthouse. And I think it is through light that information exchange happens. And because when I've done my work, when I've been doing this for so long, every now and then at the perfect timing, when I open the freezer, there is little shoots of ice that have started to form before it's taken up the whole dish. And there is light that comes out at the end of the ice that looks like a halo that I filmed and photographed. And I think it's light that paves the way for the design of the imagery, and wherever there's light, there is water. So it's water that follows that light artist all around the imagery, for the imagery of the ice. To me, that's really remarkable. And it reminds me of a woman who told me that she could speak to bees. And she said that she would watch their hives for long periods of time until eventually a bee communicated to her in whatever way and asked her to not look at their hives for such a long time, because the bee said that her conscious expression was putting too much light in the hive and they preferred it to be darker. And so where we're putting our conscious expression is also where we're putting our light. And water is a container, an absorber of photonic light. Then when we put it into the freezer and we freeze it, I'm not flash freezing, actually, I'm just using a household freezer, but get it to a certain stage, we get like a snapshot of that impression, of that, either that feeling, that thought, or that physical thing that you are using as an inspiration.
Hmm. That's beautiful, Veda. And one of the things that you mentioned about how we're literally 99% molecular water. What is the deeper, maybe spiritual, mystical meaning behind why do humans cry? Because we're releasing some of that water externally. Have you ever measured or took photograph of tears? What has that process been like, and why do we cry in general?
I have taken photos of tears, different emotional tears, but I'll tell a story that I really love. So I remember hearing this, that in our deepest sorrow, and sometimes even our greatest joy, where we cry tears of joy, and that can happen too. Um, but if we just look at it in this place for the sorrow part, and we have these tears that come out of our eye ducts and roll around our cheeks, and our face has been designed in such a perfect way that when we cry, the tears come from the eye ducts around our cheeks back towards our mouth, because they have been reordered and restructured to help heal our heart. And yet we're told, don't cry, don't cry, don't cry. And yet the tears themselves have become a medicine for us. And we are our own medicine in so many ways. And tears are one of those medicines. But I think that when you think about water, you know, I was talking to my dad, who is this kind of famous Maori fisherman called Bill Hopeper here in New Zealand, and best known for his giant moustache and humongous eyebrows. And he's hilarious and fun, and people really respect him for all his fishing videos and things. And I asked him about this once, because he does something called the Maori fishing calendar based on the moon. And we were talking about, and I also talked to midwives who say so many babies are born on a full moon. And so I asked my dad about it, and he said, yeah, well, it makes sense. You get these king tides where there's this huge, giant tides where they seem bigger than normal, that come up often around a full moon. So there is this kind of swelling. And so if we are bodies of water, of which we are, and we are affected by the constellations and by the moon, particularly in this case the moon, then he said it wouldn't surprise him at all if there's this swelling within us. We have a king tide within us, whereby the baby gets so uncomfortable in many ways that it's like, well, there's no room in here, it is time to come out, because they are also swelling as well. And I find that concept really interesting, and I will promise I'll come back to tears. But this idea of what is it to be alive, or what is life? And a very typical human way of answering that is that something that needs to procreate. But when you look at water, or just when you have sperm and egg and they connect, and then life starts to grow, that is also water growing. Not only is it water growing as an embryo, it's water also growing an amniotic sac around it. So water is growing and growing and growing in all ways inside the body. And then that water releases, but there is now a new body of water that has grown. So in some ways, it's like water really is procreating in every aspect of life becoming life becoming life. So when it comes to tears, when I'm fortunate enough to have children, and they've taught me a lot of things. And one of the things my children, especially my youngest son Rama, loves to do is to tickle me to the point where it's just like, oh my God, please stop. But one time we were having a really fun time and I was laughing so much and I was just tears of laughter were coming out of my eyes. And we were having such a nice time. It was really a family time. And so I thought, well, I won't waste this opportunity. I rushed and got my petri dish. And my petri dishes are always just on the kitchen table. And so I collected some tears. And what was really interesting about emotional tears compared to chemical tears was that emotional tears have variations of geometry that look like a little bit like a hexagon, but coming out the hexagon and then another one and another one emanating out. And that was always really interesting to me. Sorrow starts to, it's not nearly as formative, but you can see it started to form some structure, but it doesn't have the emanations of the hexagons getting larger and larger and larger and more beautiful. It's just starting, but it hasn't quite got there. Whereas joy looks, it's like an echo through the universe of joy that you're seeing in geometry. It just keeps on going. And with, and then there's a couple of others that I've done, but they're all in the hexagonal geometry. Whereas chemical tears, by cutting an onion, what I see is the iris. So rather than showing geometry, it shows me where the tears came from. So it's a very, very clear iris with a pupil inside, and even the kind of lines that come out from the pupil. So it looks exactly like an iris. So that fascinated me, is that chemical tears show where the tears kind of, where the last thing that the water saw, perhaps, if you will. And then emotional tears show geometries at different form and slightly in different compositions. A little bit like, they look a lot like spider webs, those beautiful spider webs. Some are where the spider has just done the most outstanding job and everybody admires it. And then one where the spider really hadn't completed it. It's not really completed. And that's what we saw more in the sorrow or the grief. So it wasn't that it wasn't beginning to form, it's just that it hadn't been completed. So there's a lot more to learn, I think, about looking into bodily fluids, and I think tears are one of them. I've studied urine, we've looked at things in blood, saliva. I mean, I'm interested in all things water related, and all of those are. And we learn a lot from all of them. Urine especially, it's so freely available. And so, we've done studies where we've taken the urine and used the same technique, same freezing method, from someone who was extremely stressed, high stress, and you see a lot of disorder in the urine sample. And then you take a sample from that person after an hour of meditation, and then you see coherence in the urine, and it's beautiful. I know it sounds weird to be saying that urine is beautiful, but when you're using my technique, you're tipping all of those mineral aspects away. So you're really working with the most watery aspect of the urine. So to be able to see that in your own body is very, very important. I think that we've even been able to see specific patterns that show up in the urine when a woman is fertile. So, there's lots that we can learn from doing future studies with different bodily fluids.
Huh. And looking a little bit out into the future of this work, you've hypothesized that perhaps the soul leaves the body through a vibrational vapor or mist that could possibly be a stage of water that we haven't even discovered yet. So when you're looking out into the future, I know we've talked a little bit about the fourth phase of water, but do you believe we're going to be discovering other states beyond the fourth phase that could really indicate to us what water really is at its core?
I think on our evolution, the way we're going, I think that it's inevitable. I was speaking to Robert Edward Grant a while ago, and I've spoken to him over the course of time, and both of us have been saying in our own ways that there have to be more stages to water than we've discovered so far. If you consider that even within the ice world, we've discovered that there are around about 300 different types of ice, and within each stage of that ice, there are subtle layers. So if the spirit and a piece of that really started marinating for me from my own culture, a word in my own culture, which is wairua, which means spirit in Maori. So it means also, if in the most rudimentary way, it means two waters, the physical and spiritual waters. There's great depth to that. But that then asked the question, made me ask the question, what is the spiritual water? Is that a real thing? What I think it is. So when you look at life in what we call death, at death, anyone who believes that they have a spirit or soul would say that the spirit, soul, or subtle body leaves the body upon death. But then how? How does the body leave? I think that's a fair enough question to ask if we're really looking down this investigate this idea. And I think that water answers you that question. So when you understand that there are many, many subtleties in just the ice stage, let alone every other stage that could be, and that we've discovered there are 4 phases, a liquid, solid, gas, and then a type of gel or plasma. And then you look at the stage of vapor, or the stage of evaporation, where water is in the air, but we can't see it. So we overlook so much of what we can't see. And I think often things are actually right in front of us, and we don't often think it could possibly be the air because it's so obvious, it's too big, when it's all around us and we don't see it. So within that, I think that there's definitely something to be looked at. So when you talk to anybody who has said that they can see a spirit, or they see a spirit leaving the body, the way in which they describe it is always within some kind of watery realm. It looks like a vapor, it looks kind of cloud-like, or it looks like this, or it looks like that, or more plasma-like. Well, plasma is another stage of water as well. So we start to look at these things and go, well, if we're going to see that spirit and water are connected, this is a very likely place for it to happen. So is consciousness, when we could use the word consciousness as instead of spirit, or as well as spirit, if consciousness is relating to water, some people say water is conscious. A lot of people tell me that I've said that water is conscious. Well, I could say that all life is conscious. But I don't know if water is conscious in its own right, and I don't know if is it my consciousness impacting the water. But what I do know is that water and consciousness work so intimately together that they behave as one. And within that, when I think about this aspect of water being in the way we see, like our eye lens is 99% water, and we were talking about eyes before. So I often say that if eyes are the windows to the soul, then tears are an expression of spirit. And so what is the spirit telling us when we cry? Each tear has something to tell us. We're just so busy wiping them away. I remember as a little girl having tears and then just automatically staring at them in the sunshine and seeing a little reverse me looking back in these tears. And I think when we're children, we're just, even when we're miserable, we can still be very curious. And I think as adults, we can be the same. Why not? So within the spirit world, we start looking at what is spirit. Well, firstly, the fact that water doesn't die is really interesting. So given that by molecular count we're so much water, and if you pardon the pun and you boil it down, we're water, salts, minerals, and consciousness. Now, salt's an interesting one too, because also salt doesn't die. You put salt, which is a crystal, into water, it loses its cubic form. It seems to disappear, but when the water evaporates, well, hello, the salt's there and back into form again. And even when someone is cremated, the ashes are actually salts from the person. So even through fire, you're not killing salt. So it's like the salt goes back to the earth and the spirit, or the water goes back upward into the heavens.
It's a
And
very alchemical process.
yes, and then the consciousness itself, I think, tends to go where the water is, because those two are married. They have a beautiful relationship. And so within that, you look at this idea of there being two worlds, the one we live in and the one we live on. And if the one we live in is how we experience the world through our senses, we hear through our ears, we see through the lens of our eyes, we taste through our tongue, we touch with our fingers, we smell with our nose, and all of these things are experienced in the body. We feel very much inside of the body. So what is something that we feel outside or experience outside of the body? And one of those things is that we can observe ourselves. People can share through psychedelic experiences, through near-death experiences, through all of these different deep meditational experiences, the actual ability to see themselves in the physical body and yet not be in it. So I've interviewed many people that have had near-death experiences now, many of whom say they have a sense of rising and then look down upon their body without any attachment to it whatsoever. Then they tend to go on to have a life review and other experiences. But that sense of rising, well, that's what happens with a gas. And when a gas rises and expands, it also cools, which would explain why some people feel spirit as cold. To me, this concept of how spirit leaves the body and then becomes an observer, and I think the observer is one of the many spiritual aspects of water, and then continues on, just absolutely, just on a real physical level, like if that can be measured, and I think in the future perhaps it will be able to be measured, and I think perhaps, and like you said, I've said it could be like a vibrational vapor, it could be in alignment with the ether, which also has a lot to do with water. It's not that it doesn't, but for me, when I feel into it, and I feel into, like, even asking the question, what is the spirit of water? Now, my friend Isabel Friend, who I love because she shares so much wisdom, now she thinks the spirit of water is hydrogen. And as we know, that means the creator of water. But when I feel into it, and it's not that she's wrong and I'm right, and I'm certainly not saying that, I think it's wonderful that we're even having this much depth of conversation about something we take for granted. But I feel into it, and I feel into this idea that the spirit of water, if we really feel into it, for me, is condensed light. Because if we are containers, if every life form is a container of life, and if we have a spirit or a soul, that spirit soul is held very carefully within this container of life. Since water is a container of photonic light, if water was the Holy Grail, then the contents of that grail would be light. And I really think that the relationship between light, vibration, and water are where all the answers to all the mysteries lie.
That was so beautifully said. And, you just described the spiritual aspect of water. And as you said, with the word that it's both spiritual and physical, you've said that the physical water is sort of the house of memory. And me just stretching my mind a little bit into, I'm also fascinated about ancient mysteries like you were. Didn't really quite get to studying archaeology, but I'm fascinated about studying what happened in the pyramids and ancient civilizations. And I feel like since the earth has been around for billions of years, so much memory has been stored in the ice caps and the glaciers of earth. And right now, we've been told that the ice caps are melting, and we should be panicking, and all of this is happening, and we should move out of our houses because everything's going to flood. But also offering a different perspective based on curiosity and love. What if those ice caps that are melting are actually unleashing ancient memory and ancient wisdom from our earth that we'll end up drinking in the near future, remembering maybe our ancient past? How do you see that perspective?
I think we're also our ancient past already. We are bodies of incredibly intelligent water. If we only learn to let it speak through us and to us, I think we'll realize that when we start, even that's, I think, one of the wonderful things about working in this field. It's not about thinking, oh, yeah, I know everything, because I feel like I barely know anything and I'm constantly learning. But someone once said to me, what if water is expressing its consciousness through us and every living thing to observe itself from every different perspective? And I found that a really curious and interesting idea. With the melting of the ice caps, I mean, well, as I mentioned earlier, this incredible stage of liquid crystal happens within the freezing stage, but before it's a solid, but also in the melting stage. So within the melting stage, we have fourth phase water. This is the liquid crystal age when things are starting to change. So inevitably, the water that we drink has a message for us. And that message is only read by us by the way we receive it. We are the welcoming committee. If you imagine that our saliva, which is the liquid that we can see outside of our eyelids, which is again 99% water, but when we drink water, the liquid water that's in our mouth, which is saliva, it's the most liquidy outside of urine that we have, then the water you're drinking is in touch with that. So whatever you've said, that vibration is in your mouth before you drink water. What was the last thing you said? And if you really take it on board, of which I tend to, because I take drinking water seriously, like I take everything about water seriously, but not in the way in which people might imagine. By serious, I mean I don't take it for granted. But I'm the most me I've ever been in this realm. I mean, I'm many, many things. But, I have a sense of humor. I have children that keep me young. I I've had so much pain in my life and so many joys. It has helped me grow on so many levels, and I'm still growing. But life is, not as lovely as we might always want it to be. Like New Zealand, whenever I'm doing talks, half the time there's lawnmowers going, there's like doors slamming with the wind, or dogs barking and stuff happening, and life happens. And all I know is that water knows me. So I don't have to become like suddenly super spiritual, if you think, and then need to be like a lot and sitting straight and doing a mantra and things like that. I mean, that's lovely. And sometimes I like to do things like that. But to be honest, this is a relationship. And I am in what we might term the family relationship with water, where we just love each other no matter what. And
Mm.
so within that, I always have a thank you because at my dinner table with my family, we always say what we're thankful for before we eat and drink. Every single time we sit together at the table every night. We always say what we're grateful for, and I do that for every single meal. And when it comes to water, even if it's a simple under my breath thank you, that's like your ancestor has found you. In the first world, we are so lucky to be able to ask the question, what water should I drink? Not what water can I drink? The relationship people that have to walk for miles have with water is so right in their face, so real. It's life or death for many people. And so when it comes to us who can have water so easily, it's so easy for us to take it for granted. But if you consider there's only about 2% of drinking water on the surface of Earth, I'm not talking about primary water, and that's actually able to be drunk, that's not saline. And that is 2% of the entire world. And that's managed to find its way to you, whether it's come from your tap or come from wherever it's come, or you've collected it from a spring, or whatever, if you've got it in front of you. It's not a coincidence. Water doesn't make mistakes. It's found you. It's actually found you after all this time. Imagine the thrill that it sees you as some place that it has been wanting to come into for so long. And then most of the time we just don't take any notice and then we just drink it. Imagine if that is an ancestor knocking on your door. I'm here after all this time. I have so much to share with you. And we don't even acknowledge it at all in any way by a simple thank you or welcome. It doesn't take much to get into a little ritual with water, just to say a little thank you. It goes a really, really long way, because for all the people that are programming their water to do what it wants, what for you, not what it wants, what you want, I would suggest you'll get far better results if you consider, what can I do for this water? What environment would I like this water to enter? What environment do I want this water to enter into? It's not about everything fixing. You're going to, be fixed by programming the water outside of you. Because where this word program, it's such a big one. It's like, oh, we watch programs, so we're being programmed. It's like, well, I think that, water has this wildness about it, but it chooses love every time. It doesn't resist. It doesn't resist the people that we resist. There is so much judgment that we have as human beings about other human beings, whether we like it or not, whether we're willing to admit it or not. There's someone will trigger us, somebody's there, someone in government we don't like, or whatever the thing is. But water doesn't do that. Water will turn up in their glass, having chosen them to enter. It's not like we think we are. It is the best version of who we are. It is by far the best version of who we are. And so just a little thank you before we drink water can make the biggest difference for the way in which it can heal us and the way in which it can teach us. And it's water speaking to water at the end of the day.
Hmm. I also believe that it's our sense of humor that makes life way more interesting. And I'm curious to know then, does water, because you mentioned the story where the water, when it felt it was being deceived by you, it told you no. But has there been moments where water has shown qualities of having a sense of humor when you're in those conversations?
All the time. It's when especially when I'm being arrogant in my thinking and like, oh yeah, I definitely know what water's going to do now. That I have been taught that it doesn't work very well for me. And so I was doing repeated studies with the sound of Om. And so I kept seeing these spiral shapes. And then I thought, well, the sound of a gong kind of sounds the same, or very similar anyway. And I thought, oh, I bet it's going to show me a similar pattern to the sound of Om. And so I was like, okay, I bet I'm going to see. I was really thinking I would see this spiral shape. But as per usual, water didn't do that at all. Water designed the gong with a mallet on top instead. It designed the instrument. So I was
Very
like, oh,
literal.
very literal. Um, oh gosh, there's so many different things where water has had a sense of humor. Um, I've done a big genre. There are lots and lots of genres of music because I feel like my son, when he saw Emoto's book, when he was a lot younger, he came to me and he said, "Mum, I think water hates me." And I'm like, "Oh, baby, why?" And he said, "Because look, water only likes classical music and John Lennon, and it hates heavy metal." And that is the danger of showing contrasts. People I've seen are very, very addicted to seeing the best and worst of things,
Yeah.
but often there's a lot in between that. And so he said, "Well, I don't really like heavy metal that much, Mum, but," he said, "I really love Tupac, and Tupac swears, and so therefore my water must hate me." I'm like, "No, baby, water doesn't hate you. No, if anything, it's just because the people that did that probably didn't like it." And so I said, "Let's see what water will do with lots of genres of music." And we started with Tupac for him. And used a song called "All Eyes on Me," and we saw this incredible eye with a pupil inside. And then we continued on, and I came to understand and see that water loves to pick up on words and design words from songs. So a funny sense of humor one is that because I'm doing all genres, it's not necessarily the one I love. I actually leave the room when we do this, so I do my best not to interfere. But we did one with Taylor Swift's song, about breaking up with her ex and how we're never gonna get back together.
Which are about all of them. Which one of all of them are they?
And, in the ice, there was 2 letters, EX, and I was like, "Oh my god, that's really, really interesting and really funny." And then, I
No way.
used the song Crocodile Rock, and I saw this crocodile with a big smile in the eyes. Um and you just never know what you're going to get. So I've, I mean, with over 52,000 photos of water responding in these ways, I think it's really important to tell people just how much work I've actually got. It's almost becomes difficult to choose which one because there's so many and it's a constant conversation. But but I think the times where I just let go and get water to show me. I mean, I do have some funny stories, but I don't know if I could tell them because they're slightly risque, I suppose. But I can say it in a nice way, or I can not say it. I'll leave that up to you.
We're open to it. We're open to hearing it. All of it.
Well, it was really funny for me anyway. So I have a friend, and she has this amazing crystal, like a smoky quartz crystal. It's really a really big one, and it's right beside her bed. And whenever I go to her house, I'm like, oh my God, I'd love to see what the crystal energy looks like from that crystal, because I've used all kinds of different things in the past, from crystals to, you know, homeopathy to all kinds of things. And, so I said, "Oh, because she lived a little bit far from me. So I said, "Could you put, like, a glass or bottle of water beside that big crystal and leave it overnight. And I will come pick it up in the morning because I was planning to visit her, and I'll go home and I'll do the crystallography straight away. And she said, yeah, sure, no problem. So she did that, everything fine. And so I got the crystallography, and and there was just enough to do 2 petri dishes with the water she gave me. So I did them both at the same time. And in the first one, there was this image of a phallus, which was really undeniable. And in the other one, there was this yoni, which was also like it was about as graphic as you could get for both of them. And I was like, "Oh my God." So I rang her up and I said, "Oh, hey, so what were you doing last night?" And and she said, "Why?" And I said, "Well," and I sent her the photos and she was like, "Oh my God, it's ice porn." And she said that she said her and her partner had made love that night. And I was like, water was far more interested in what you were doing than looking at the crystal, obviously.
You got a little audience on you with the
Audience.
water.
She said, "I will never look at water the same way again." So
Wow.
that was quite a funny little scenario that happened, yeah.
That's beautiful. That's so funny. There's a quote that you often share by Manly P. Hall, which is, when the human race learns to read the language of symbolism, a great veil will fall from the eyes of men. So you just mentioned that you've collected over 52,000 photographs, um, from the hydroglyphs to the patterns of water. I'm wondering if we could share a little bit of the imagery behind those photographs that you've taken, that you so kindly prepared a little presentation, just to leave us with not just hearing it from our visual sense. I mean, from our, our hearing, our auditory, but also seeing it from a visual sense of all these beautiful pictures that you've taken. Maybe we'll leave out the porn ones, but we'll.
I haven't put them in. Don't
I'm
panic.
joking. I'm joking.
No problem. All right. Let me go here.
We'll pick the PG-13 ones.
Okay, can you see the screen fine?
Yes.
Great. So, even right here, the living waters, I would say to people that water didn't even used to be called water many, many, many years ago. In Old England, water was called the waters. And from there, when Romans brought plumbing into being, we started to seeing our waste getting taken away with water. The waters became water. And so often now we call it H2O. But where there is a trickling down of ancient information from the waters being like a living body of water, outside of biblically, is where we say her waters broke. Not her water broke, her waters broke. Because we remember in the language that there was a time where water was revered as a living thing. Think about the headwaters, think about the mouth of the river, think about a body of water. All of these things relate to water being like a person. So we've seen Emoto's work. This is Laurent Costa's work. Not so many people have seen this. It's nice to see the smiley faces that we talked about in the beginning, the heart, the little kind of rabbit. And all of these things happened from him smiling at the water prior to freezing, and then seeing smiley faces, or seeing hearts from a loving expression, or seeing a rabbit or cat, I can't remember which is that, from having bought one. So Laurent was seeing imagery relative to his thoughts of the day, his smile in the moment, or things he'd been thinking about for the last week. His work is really amazing. Even this one, I think Laurent's work was where he put a water bottle on top of one of Da Vinci's books, and it designed this incredible ice crystal. And this is him looking down the microscope.
Wow.
So this is my very, very first ice image that we talked about, the hand. As you can see, it really does look like an X-ray of a hand.
5 fingers and everything.
and everything. This was the fish. This was the second photo I ever talked about or ever took. Here's the outline of the fish, the gills, the eye, the fin, and the tail. And you see it looks feathery. The reason it looks feathery is because when you freeze seawater that you've collected from the beach, it freezes really differently than water that you've collected from a spring, for example. Now, this is the difference between my old technique and my new technique. This is when I froze water solid. This is where the water is frozen for a very brief time, where it's a liquid crystal. And my son Rama did all of this. And so Rama was trying to convince me to buy him a bow and arrow because he said, well, Mom, I'm named after Lord Rama, and Lord Rama always has a bow and arrow, therefore I should have one. He's all of about 5 or 6 or something like that. And he said, if I can put get an arrow in the ice, would you buy me one? And I'm like, well, that's really, original thinking. So points for that. So I said, yeah, maybe. And so he did this whole thing himself. He got the water. He actually, what he did, I watched him do it. He stood there and with his arm, and he pulled his pretend arrow back, like bow back, and shot an arrow into the water. And then he froze it. And then he tipped the liquid away. He photographed this. He took this photo on my phone. And so, this is all Rama's work right here. And
Wow.
he did a fantastic job. But you really can see how much light comes through compared to when you freeze water solid. This is the 3 stages of freezing. This is what you want to see in the freezer, where there is this is all liquid water, and then these things here are ice. So that's what it should look like in your freezer. It will look different each time, but that's what you're going to see. Then you've over-frozen when you have an ice sandwich where there's liquid in the middle, and then a solid looks like there's tons of all these little bubbles, and it's really, really hard to see the imagery. Again, spirit, blood, and body. That's what I meant when I said that. This is what it looks like when you're freezing. This is where I would take the water out at this stage. This has been sped up in the freezer. Now, just to bring your awareness, this little area over here, that is actually a hydroglyph where I've used the word information, and that's what it looks like. It looks like an ancient cuneiform or ancient language, and we have seen this around the world. That's something I'm working on for the future, is actually recording all of the different varied aspects of this information hydroglyph. So what you're going to see next is the water coming from the top down. It looks like dark bubbles, and then below there's this washing away. The dark bubbles are stuck between 2 layers of ice. The washing away is actually the top layer.
So we might be able to say that language actually came rooted from water.
I really am starting to think that. I think that this is an ancient remembering, that we're just remembering about this. Now, what you're seeing here, although I'd like it to have gone a little faster than this, but you can see how clouded over it looks until it finally freezes. So that looks completely different than the stage I showed you earlier, which is why I use my technique the way I do. Now, here are some examples of the 3 ways that water shares information. So these are what we call signature patterns. So this is the signature pattern of spring water collected and frozen within an hour. Spring water structures will change the longer it's been sitting in a bottle, or the longer it's been not moving. This is the signature pattern of rain. This is the signature pattern of water through a filter. This is a signature pattern of municipal tap water. Although we need to really zoom in on these, this is the signature pattern of seawater. And in each little indentation, there's a little star. So it's covered in like little subwoofers with stars inside. It's actually a very, very beautiful. It's just a little harder to see because you've seen the entire dish in that. This is where I've used picture influences, or inspirations as I prefer to call them, where I've basically printed a picture I like and then put the dish on it for 30 seconds. That's my protocol. It's not too long, it's not too short. Water is quantum. It often knows what I'm doing before I even do it. But people like to have some protocol, so I say 30 seconds, and you can see the outcome. And this is just a very small example of hydroglyphs where you have repeatability of imagery, where I've used two words, both marriage and ring show this ring imagery. So I thought, well, a really interesting thing to do, since water loves to design in pictures, would be to show it photos of different people to see if we can see facial recognition in water. What would happen? So I did that with my friend Wendy's photo here, and you can see that it designed her face. So what happens if I take this image and show it to water, the image it designed? So that's what I did. And then it designed a negative of the face. And I think this is really important for people to see because it's not so random when you see these things. And then I took the negative of the face and put the dish of water on top of that, and you can see there is another face happening, but it's not quite as clear. But you can see there's still the outline there. So this is really, really interesting stuff. And then I've taken various different photos of people and shown that it looks like the pictures I've shown it to. This is where I asked a lady who was pregnant to take a sip of water and then leave me the rest whilst she was thinking of her baby. There's a couple of really interesting things about this. It's where you have the outline of the spine of the child, which is whenever we see embryos, it's always like light around the whole back of the child. But what's interesting is she was holding her tummy as she was thinking about her baby, and you can see a light hand right here down the bottom. And the next day she went for her ultrasound, and you can see it compared here. This is an interesting one, and I've done this quite often, where I'll let the ice melt and then refreeze it to see how long an impression will last for. So, and I find this interesting too because we don't see the face, we just see the attive crown designed in both situations here. But this was where the original ice imagery, I let it melt and then it designed, there was still an imprint in the ice. This is where we're looking at anatomy, where I've put, just put my foot over the dish for 30 seconds and taken it off, and we see and the entirety. So quite often we'll put, a toe in the ice and it'll show the whole foot. So it's a little bit like the seed reading the whole full potential. But this one here is interesting, where I put my thumb in the water, and it designed my thumb and the nail, but you might notice that there is a chip in the nail here. What's interesting is this is like a sign of hydromancy, because 3 hours after doing this, I chipped my nail in exactly the same space.
It read your future.
Yeah. And it's not the first time I've seen that. This is where I've let this ice melt and refrozen it. Now we look at pictures of animals. I mean, there's just endless different examples, but the one with the dog, the second one with the nose, I love that one because a dog smelt the water and the water just designed the dog's nose. There's stories behind each one. Again, this is where I've let the water melt and refrozen it, and you can see the imprint is still there. This is where I've just put physical things that outside of the crab claw, it's all man-made things. So I was curious, would it be different? Does it mostly show the imprint of natural things? But I've seen man-made things in there too. Just some repeatability. I put the dish on different angles and in different places of the guitar, and saw different viewpoints of the guitar shown in the ice. And whenever I've put different types of pyramids in the water, we see a pyramid shape. The ice, this is really interesting, the ice eggs, where we have different eggs that I've put in, and I've removed them before I've frozen them, and you can see that they're all over here. There's the second egg for this one is here. But this is really interesting because I was given eggs from somebody who had their own chickens, and they did have a rooster, so sometimes some of them were fertile. It was hard to know which ones they are. And so for this particular one, when I put the egg in there and removed it, it just showed something inside the egg. It looked different than all the other impressions of the egg. And when you crack an egg open, if there's a little dot on top of the yolk, you can see that then that has been fertilized. And we found out when we cracked that egg open that it was an actual fertile egg, except that the water knew before we did.
Wow.
I've talked about using words, and one of the reasons I started using words was also to see whether or not if I used a word that was a concept rather than something that I could be projecting, because a lot of people think and say, well, you might just be projecting what you think something looks like into the water. But even saying that is suggesting that water can pick up on my thought projection, which is, I have seen that. But within this situation, I wanted to see what water might design for a word like ego, which is a concept, right? And if I can zoom in, hopefully, if you see, there's a little face, big shoulders, long neck, and a big balloon head. For the word ego, that's pretty remarkable. This is in Hindi. This word is pya, which means love. This is pugio, which is Latin for dagger. Here is Japanese for the word snow. And so we start to see, even within the conception here, it looks like an egg with a sperm inside. So it was really amazing to me. IVF is only 3 letters. They don't even make any sense. They don't make a word. We know what that means, but it looks like a needle going into an egg.
Wow.
Crop circle, these are just some of the repeatability that I'm showing, where I've used this word and seen these symbols appear. This is 2 words, which is, different than just the one. So we have this symbol appear. Now here we have my initials. We talked about this. So when I asked water, do you know my name? And it designed my initials. Well, this is how I link my initials. Here are some where I've done it again, but this time I asked a slightly different question. I asked, can you please show me my name at birth? Now, over here is a hydroglyph. Now, hydroglyphs are different to the art of water. That is where I've seen a lot of repeatability. I'll be able to show you that more examples soon. But when you have 2 circles like this has got the energetic meaning of conception. And when it's 1 circle alone, it means complete. So here we have 2 hydroglyphs, which means complete conception. And then we have my 2 initials, but not linked, because I only started linking them when I became older. Here is where I fell asleep and forgot about it, and it still designed the big VA after asking the same question. And over here, I said to the water, do you know my 2 Indian names? Because I've been given 2 Indian names at birth, Veda and Karan. And so instead we see the VK. And up here it looks very much like something like Hindi. Here are words in ice. This is not mine. I've taught thousands of people how to do this work now. And this lady was asking a personal question, should I stay or go? She fell asleep on the couch, and when she woke up, she had her answer. Here I was asking the cat, are you in or are you out? And I was holding the dish at the time before I froze it, and I got in. I had asked water, who are you? And I got, I am. And then this was from the song.
Am.
Yeah.
Wow.
And then I got fly me to the moon. In this, we saw it fly in the ice. This was one of my more extraordinary ones because I was asked to use the word Yeshua to the water, and this is the result, this beautiful kind of cup. But I noticed something unusual going on over here, and I'm always looking for things that seem a little different in the water. So I zoomed in on it, and here it is over here. So because it looked like writing, but not writing that I knew, I put it on social media, and I had over 1,000 people reply, because I said, does this look like anything like writing to anybody? And I had 1,000 people tell me that it's basically, it's Hebrew for the word Yeshua.
No way.
Yeah, way. I mean, that blew me away.
What does the cup mean
Well,
regarding
that
Yeshua?
I guess it's open to interpretation, but you could look at, the cup of Christ. There's lots of things you could consider about that. But it also looked like an angel wing over here. There's so much within this that you could look at it for days. This is other people's work. I think it's great to share that other people see art and hydroglyphs as well as signature patterns as well. Each one has a story. I probably don't have time to go into them all, but these are just many, many examples. You might not be able to see, but this dog one is actually really quite cool. When we zoom in, here you can see the dog's nose in quite a lot of clarity, and the color of his face and his head here, all the way down to his paws.
Oh, wow.
So yeah, again, a lot of children did these. They go on and on. This one's really cool because it's so weird looking. But this lady had taken a sip of water. She'd spat it into the petri dish and frozen it. Now, what's unique is that she'd just had her tongue pierced. This is what I was talking about,
Oh,
water reading potentials, where I put the seed and it designed the sunflower. Here's where it designed the pod, which is the fruit of the flax plant. Here's where it designed the apple. And what's cool about this is this was the first one. This was the actual apple that I used. And then I let the ice melt and refroze it a day later, and I got this. And then I let that melt, and I froze this 3 days later, and I got this. So biological things like seeds or certain bodily fluids can last for a really long time when you let them melt and refreeze, melt and refreeze. But when I put a pistachio shell with no nut, we just see the ice designed the pistachio shell instead. Okay. This is how hydroglyphs began, and I realize we're probably running short of time, but they began organically, as most of my work did, because I was using the song Stairway to Heaven, and I kept seeing a stairway appear in the ice. And then I thought, oh, I wonder if that actually means stairway. So I wrote the word stairway, put my dish of water on top of it, 30 seconds, removed, and I saw the stairway. And then I'm like, oh, let's see if it does it again. And I kept doing it. And then I did it over 50 times over the course of 3 months using different waters when I knew no better. And I kept seeing the same style of stairway. And then I started to realize that this isn't random. And I tend to use for hydroglyphs now, I have a very specific protocol. So I use rainwater. I know the signature pattern of rain. It seems to be very open to being worked with and works alongside with me really well. And so I tend to use rainwater for this. But here are 64 examples of the stairway hydroglyph.
Why do you think
And
rainwater is easier to work with?
it's, well, for hydroglyphs, because I think it's one of the more neutral waters. And I'm able to collect it here in New Zealand because we have so much rain. When I mean, I see hydroglyphs in all water, but I'm trying to choose one. One of the interesting things I've learned is that there is a signature pattern for spring water that is the same as the hydroglyph for the word living and the word death. And that looks like what I call a star fern hexagon. And why I know that it's a hydroglyph is because I was using rainwater. Because rainwater doesn't look like that. So when you use rainwater and you see these beautiful hexagonal patterns showing when you're using specific words, you know that it's changed. Now, it's much easier to work with rainwater here because I can collect it and use it. Whereas spring water, even if you've collected it, it's been a few hours, days, it's just not as easy to work with because it can change so much. So if you know the signature pattern of your water and you know that it's steady, then you know when it's changed. So I tend to work that way with hydroglyphs.
That makes sense.
So this was from the song Single Ladies, which is the kind of tagline is, if you like it, then you should have put a ring on it. So we see this ring. And there's a video here which shows that the rings are not bubbles. Some people might think that they are, but the bubbles you can see actually down below in that video, whereas the ring here is clearly more of a plasma state. So what's nice is that, you can really see the size of it as well, that it's visible with the naked eye. I'm not using a microscope. I take all my photos on my iPhone. This is the hydroglyph with the energetic meanings of change and winter. And I'm not saying that water reads words. What I'm more suggesting is that water absorbs the energy of a word and almost reverse engineers it back to some kind of living principle.
You said that you found that out because of music.
Yes, all from music. So this is that star fern hexagon I was talking about. Now, this is so beautiful. And this is means the word living, it means the word death, and it means the word gratitude. And this is a bunch of them here, of which I can read. There are more, but when you have multiple circles, it means multiply or multiple, and it means many. Then we have the empty circle, which means completion. And you have the ring, which also means marriage. Then you have the empty hexagon, which means individual and I. Sometimes it can also mean lonely. The spikes that come out of a platform, which you can't quite see as well in this, means stress. Then we have interwoven, special, change in winter, money and abundance, conception, wholeness, breathing and lungs, sugar and addiction, chemical. This is the stairway as well as to climb up. Because I wrote the words climb up because I thought, well, what do you do with a stairway? And you climb up. And when I used the words climb down, I didn't get that. This is the information hydroglyph. This looks like a magic wand and it means magic. This is light and guidance and star. This is an indented woofer with subwoofer. You know what I was talking about with a little star in the middle? And we see that sometimes, or we see that as a signature pattern of seawater. But what's beautiful about using rainwater is that when I'm using rainwater and I use the words electrical charge and also salt, I see this image appear. So you start to see the benefits of using a water that that is quite a neutral design. Here is the hydroglyph for free energy, which looks very much like what I was trying to explain about tears. This is what I mean by those hexagonal patternings. This is what we call the speckle. It means earth and mother. This is air. It looks like feathers and also the way wind blows across the water. This is the message glyph. It is a triangle with frills on the side and what looks like the information glyph on top. This means knowledge. This means this lotus is enlightenment and purity. This is living and death, because from the perspective of water, there is no death. There is only transition. So the word death is another word for living. When you have two what look like maple leaves touching, one big, one small, it means friends. When you have a maple leaf with one big, long fern, that has the energetic meaning of to rise up. Then you have the creation hydroglyph, which looks like waves with seeds. Then you have one that's just waves with no seeds, and that's water. This is also has the energetic meaning of fire. So the creation means creation and fire. And then we have the one that is also looks like the creation glyph, but it means water. Then we have organism, we have visionary, we have before Easter, which the cross has the line from the top to the bottom. And then we have after Easter, where it's just the cross. Then we have extraterrestrial, we have love, we have sun, we have crop circle, we have seed, and we have cleanse. And we have more, but we don't have time to go into all of those right now.
It's like learning a whole new language. And I imagine that in the future, we'll be able to put these images side by side and create whole sentences, maybe even books that the next generation of children will learn how to read. This is
That is
fascinating.
one hope for sure. What we're seeing here is a story, and I don't know how much time we have. We may need to wrap up soon, but where a mum, reached out to me, and she had told me that her daughter is severely disabled, unable to write or speak, walk, any of these things. And it had been a very, very hard to, to have to see your child that way every day and to be that caregiver. And so this mum, I don't know how she found out about me, but she said, look, I don't know. I want to know that my daughter, I want to know that she knows how much I love her, because it's been so hard. And she said her daughter could only make sounds, like kind of grunt sounds. And so she asked me if she recorded the sounds her daughter made after she asked her, do you know how much I love you? Could I freeze the water? So I said, of course, I'll show you whatever it shows. And although she has asked to keep that Petri dish picture private, she has kindly allowed me to share her story and what was in the dish. So there were 4 hydroglyphs in that dish of water, and these were what they were. So we have the individual hydroglyph, which also means I. And then we had a heart, which we know has an energetic meaning of love. We have the multiplication hydroglyph, which also means many or a lot. And then we have the speckle, which means earth as well as mother. So when you put them all together, what the daughter was telling the mother was exactly what the mother was telling the daughter. The daughter wanted the mother
Wow.
to know, I love you so much, Mummy. And I was fortunate enough to be on FaceTime when the mum was there holding, I was showing the dish through FaceTime, and I was explaining everything, and the mum was with the daughter, and the little girl was trying to clap her hands. And it was just such a special, special moment where this work is a voice for the voiceless. And I heard the sad news that not so long ago, this little girl passed away. And so this makes this even more important to share, I think, that this is a way in which all life can communicate. And although it's very early stages, and I only have about 47 hydroglyphs at the moment, they do have multiple layers of meaning, and I do have a team working with me. And so we are getting somewhere with it. And I think it's incredible, really. So I can stop here, or I can continue to share, but I can honestly talk for about 12 hours because there's so many areas we can
I
go.
could talk to you for 24 hours, so we're good.
Let me just see what else. Oh, yeah. So this is my daughter holding some ice. This is over frozen ice, but it's a cool photo. It was there to remind me to say that when you're using words, as we've just seen the power and the formative aspect of how water can design from the energy of words. Well, imagine if you write a word for yourself that comes from the well of knowledge within you. And say, for example, you have insomnia. maybe that word is rest. And you write that word, you do the technique, which is simple and easy for anyone to learn. And then instead of just taking a photo of it, imagine embodying it. Imagine eating the ice. So my daughter was at around this age. I was holding up a dish of crystallography, and she said to me, "Oh, Mum, can I have that?" So I gave it to her, and she began to eat the ice. And I said, "Oh, what are you doing?" And she said, "It's good for me, Mummy." It's like, really? And then her brother, Rama, started to do the same thing several weeks later of his own accord. And over the course of years, the children, when they felt like it, would come and they would eat the crystallography, and they would do it themselves sometimes, just so they could eat the ice. And so over the course of many years, I've been working with other parents, and they say, "You know what? Our children eat the ice." And I'm like, "Really? So do mine." And then over the course of time, without getting too much into a big conversation, I became aware that water really seems to be picking up on the energy of these words, and that when you use it in a healing modality, by eating the ice for about a week, once a day, people have told me, over 100 people over the course of a couple of years now, that it has helped heal them from so many things.
It's the new
From
supplement.
Yeah, well, almost in a homeopathic way, but
Yeah.
we're working in liquid crystal medicine. So one
Hmm.
lady, she couldn't even walk. She had an autoimmune thing going on from an injection she got, and so she was just doing movement with her arms and various things, but eating the ice every day and finding a word that just felt right. It doesn't need to make sense. She started with the word connection for the first month. She did this for 9 months. She saw 100% healing happen within 9 months. So it's not just a random thing. Water doesn't make mistakes. I do think that liquid crystal is one of the medicines, if you will, of the future. I'm not making any, that's what I think. This has had no clinical trials. I'm not saying any of that, but it's free, it's fun, and you got nothing to lose by giving it a try. And the more people do it, the more information we all get. Like I've said to so many people, you know, I'm showing and sharing what I see. It's up to other people to help me find larger bodies of work, more consistency, ask those questions. How is this happening? What does it mean? Um, I talked about light. Now, this is a photo of the light that I see coming out of ice as it's freezing. I think it's really great to see those visuals. Um, this is Gennady Krokalev, and I love to talk about him. So he was working with psychiatric patients, and he was a scientist and a psychiatrist. And he had read in a magazine called, in Russian, See the Other Way Around, he was Russian, that there is the possibility that the retina of the eye records information and can share that information like a hologram that can be photographed when somebody has a very clear vision in their mind's eye. So many of his patients were having hallucinations, and he created this thing, which this camera is called which kind of camera is it? It starts with an R. It'll come to me. It's a black and white camera which has this long lens, and then he's created these goggles, like scuba diving goggles. And he's taken the lens out of the goggles. So as the patient is there, he's asking, what are you seeing? And there's an assistant writing down what they say. So he takes a photograph of their eyes as they are having a hallucination. And of the 200 people he did this with, over 117 were able to confirm that the photographs that he took were in fact what they were seeing. So here are some of his photos. They are extremely hard to come by. Sadly, Gennady, as has happened with so many people, became a bit of a target. He rang his brother 3 hours before he died and said, "I've just discovered something that will change the world." And then when his brother finally got there, he was found hanging, and his work was confiscated, and his work was made confidential. So trying to find much about Gennady Krokalev is actually very difficult. But here are 3 of the retina photos he took of people's eyes. Now, this in Russian means antlers. This, you can see the face, it doesn't really need any description. And in Russian, this says snake.
Hmm.
Now, this was
Veda,
repeated. Yes?
sorry to interrupt you. I was just curious there because that sounds like a whole mystery story. What do you think that he was on the verge of reporting and discovering with the world?
I don't know. I can only guess, and it could be possible that with this kind of work, you're able to see that um, that what we have is the materialization of thought, is that thought is kind of material in its own way, and that we can literally, we're already, just by having a very clear vision of it, we can manifest what we see based on the fact that there is now a hologram of that in the world around us, and that just needs to be added to start building on making it happen in the physical. And maybe he did that. I don't know. It's a guess. But his work was repeated by more Russian scientists, and instead of working with psychiatric patients, they used someone who could remote view. And what the scientists did was that they stood behind a wall with numbers and shapes they were holding up. And as the remote viewer tuned in, she would tell the person who was taking the photograph, "Okay, I've got it in my mind's eye," and then they would take the photos. And here are a couple of the photos where the scientists were holding the number 1, the triangle, and this was simply by her holding those visions in her mind's eye. They set the whole thing same thing up with the same kind of old camera. They're using scuba diving mask here. You can see how they've done it. All the scientists did it. And they even made a documentary called something like "Thought is Material, It's Proven." And it only worked if you had a real clear vision in your mind's eye, which is almost the opposite. Well, it's not the opposite. I have seen imagery from having a thought in my mind's eye, but I often have found that water, when you're working with the water, it's picking up so much more emotion than thought. But I've done something similar where I've like looked at a picture, and you get a real imprint of that picture, then closed my eyes, then looked at the water and seen the image in the ice of the picture I was looking at. I've closed my eyes and written a word, in my mind's eye. I wrote the word love, Love, in capital letters, and then looked at the water and I saw the word Love in the ice. So I know all of these things are in fact possible and have been proven several times by scientists here. This is cool because you have these scientists took a living leaf and cut it in sections. Then they took a section of the leaf and put it under a high-frequency electromagnetic field. And what ended up being shown from the section that they took out was the entire leaf, less the sections. And this is called phantom transference. And it really does answer the question about, for me anyway, I have a friend who had their arm amputated from an accident, and the person often says they feel their whole arm is still there. Well, I think that in the subtle body, the energy is still there. There's a feeling that it's still there that is very real. And that again ties in with the world of water, because the water in the air is attracted to electrical charge, and there is a charge still emanating out of the subtle layer, the subtle body. because we have multiple, layers of the physical body that are also enter into the spiritual realm, which go into the subtle body. And the subtle body is always in a hole. It's not cut when the arm is cut. So it remembers the whole, is more of what I'm trying to say. So I've worked with homeopathy, and I've seen quite a lot of interesting things where I put a drop of the homeopathic remedy into the water, and what I see with the few repeat studies that I've done is that there are clear repeated patterns that show, and there are examples here of different repeated remedies, and there are ones here where I've used them and repeated them 3 times. So we can see that even though it's early days, the remedy is showing its memory of a whole. And also, if we're not seeing the plant, like for example, this one's milk thistle, and it looks like milk thistle. If we don't see the plant or whatever the remedy came from, then it seems to also show what an organ, for example, or something that looks like the organ it's helpful for the person. So, for example, this one I think looks a lot like a heart, and this remedy is meant to be good for that. Very interesting, and we can move on. I think there's a lot to go on about homeopathy because it's so bit much. I think that I can just go down a complete rabbit hole, but I do think that the higher the dilution, people will often wonder, like, well, how does it work if it's basically nothing in the water, as people might say, but that nothing can be everything. If you think about spirit as it leaves a body, it's suddenly not within the container, it expands. So as the spirit of the plant or whatever it is leaves the body that it was in, that it was housed in, and then it's now in a substrate of water that is able to expand and expand and expand as spirit. So it does not surprise me at all that homeopathy actually works. This is where I had a tummy ache after my car accident that I briefly mentioned earlier. I was like, why am I having a tummy ache that felt really crampy, and I don't get, I'm usually really, really well. So I put a dish of water onto my tummy, and it showed me something that looked like carrots, which meant something to me because of all of the things and all of the bowel surgery I had from the seatbelt injury, from the car accident, and all the rest of it. One of the only things I sometimes still struggle with eating is carrots. And when I rang my friend, I'd been to her house and she'd made a casserole. I said, were there carrots in there? She said, oh yeah, I just chopped them up really finely. And it's like, oh yeah, that makes sense. And then this one where I was checking fertility, and I put my dish of water on the abdomen, and it really does look so much like the ovaries, and it looked like there was an egg in one of them. Frequencies, this is what 528 hertz frequency designed. So you can see what it looks like in the dish. It's so beautiful. This is the creation glyph, actually. This is what it looks like. This is how much texture there is. It's so beautiful. This is for 174 hertz. This is the hydroglyph as well, for the free energy. But it's accompanied by a couple of little spots there that I can see that are the electrical charge hydroglyph as well. This is the sound of Om. We talked about that spiral pattern you can see here. This is the sound of my cat purring. This is the sound of cicadas. This is after playing the sound of the moon to the water, so the solar winds around the moon.
Have you recorded your own voice with the water?
Well, I should do that. I haven't really done that much because I get asked to do so many things for other people. So I tend to limit what I do for myself with water unless it's of really big significance. I try to really make sure that this doesn't feel like an experiment, but feels like a relationship. I really try to keep that very safe for myself. Um, Theodore Schwenk wrote a book called Sensitive Chaos. And in this, he said, a stream bubbling merrily over the stones forms countless inner surfaces and tiny vortices, which are all sense organs. I love that concept, that all the little vortices are sense organs open to the cosmos, which perceive the course of events in the heavens. And water passes on the impressions it has received wherever it is absorbed by the earth and the plants, by the animals and man. In moving water, the earthly world thus allows the ever-changing life in the universe of the stars to flow into the course of its own life. This is just where, that's kind of interesting for someone who wants to see some controls. This is all the same tap water. This is my control, where I gave it no influence, it looked pretty much the same. And this is where the same tap water, where afterwards I played a singing bowl, and you can see that it really made a difference. This was with 5G, so there's a story, and as we go towards, I'm starting to lose my voice because I have been speaking a lot today, and then almost all day yesterday as well, and I might leave it here because it's an inspiring place to end. You might not think 5G sounds so inspiring, but still, the story is. So a few years ago, when 5G first came out, I went and I took spring water. I know the signature pattern of spring water. Here it is. It looks like a beautiful hexagonal pattern. I took the crystallography, which is here. Well, it looks like this anyway. And then I went and I let that melt, and I put it by the 5G tower. And then I brought it back. I refroze it, and it was like a shock wave had gone through the ice. When I let that melt, and this is not what we're looking at right this second, when I let that melt and refroze it, the shock wave stayed. The shock wave stayed throughout the melts and refreezes at least 7 times, because that's about the most I can do, because each time you tip a little water off. So you get less and less water to work with. So that concerned me, because it seemed like there was real disorder happening. However, I was inspired to do this again. A couple of years ago, I collected the same spring water, and this is it here. I let that melt and refroze it after exposing it to the 5G tower for 15 minutes. And here's the shock wave. Okay, very disordered. You see different colors coming through my work because the layer is so thin that you see light coming through, and if it's at different times, or I've just moved the dish slightly, you can get slightly different colors. The very next melt and refreeze, we're starting to see something quite different than this. It's got a hydroglyph. It has the hydroglyph for message, and then it also has the information hydroglyph over here. So we're seeing a message of information. The very next melt and refreeze, the water has become even more coherent than when it began. So what we're literally seeing is that water doesn't just have memory. Why do we have memory? We hear a term water memory all the time, but why? Why do we even have memory? Well, one of the reasons we have memory is to learn. What we're seeing here is that water is also self-learning, and it has taught itself to heal. It's taught itself how to go around these frequencies, work with them, and then heal to be stronger and even more beautiful than when it began. And by molecular count, we are 99% water. So there's just so much there for us to take away. I literally can speak for hours, but I am starting to realize I'm starting to lose my voice a little bit.
No, beautiful. Thank you so much, Veda, for just sharing so abundantly all the information that you've gathered. And, just before we let you go, I had just 2 questions to ask regarding a message from the water and also for the next generations. But before that, where can people connect with your work even further? You're talking about also creating teams of people, that you're not the only one that is creating these images. But now, if we really want to create a new language, which it seems to me like we're doing with this work, is how would you encourage people to join you in your mission to get this message out to the world?
Well, I'd say that the best place to go is my website. If you put the code blessing as you check out into the step-by-step guide, it's called CMP. Some people get a little confused because they say, what's CMP? It's just what I call my technique. It stands for collective molecular photography. It's because I think the water is working as a collective to design imagery. So it's easy to find. It's under my PDFs on my website, and it's free if you put the word blessing in there. It's just get it for free. My book also has my technique in the back, and you can get my book. This is it, The Living Language of Water, from my website, and it also has the technique in the back. It has over 1,500 photos and over 300 pages. Very big, heavy book. Lots of videos, lots of podcasts I've done, lots of resources on my website, and I share daily on Instagram, which is Veda Austin _water. And I used to, well, I still do, just not as often, would go into schools and teach a mix of science and art. And it was an incredible, the children just know this work already. They're so imaginative as well. And it does take, just a curious mind. So I'd say if you're super skeptical and you think, oh, this is absolute baloney, then if you wanted to try it for yourself, just be curious. Try not to bring that too much with you. Because when you do this work, you will see a signature pattern of water. You might see an artistic expression, and you might see hydroglyphs, or you might see all three. I just did a beginner's workshop yesterday, and 2 people saw all three in the ice. So it really is, you're going to get to know the water better. And I always say, if you consider that this is a relationship, let's start with not expecting water to do what you want. Let's just get to know water in the first place. Let's see what it wants to show us. And let's get to have that feeling where it's not all about control, and actually start to remember what it's like to be free.
Hmm. Veda, we've spent most of this episode really seeing water in a new way that we've never seen before. And just to turn the tables around, you said that water sees us truly the way that you wish we could see ourselves. So, how do you feel that water sees humanity in its current stage right now?
It's an excellent question. Um, we even within that question, I would suggest that we don't see ourselves as bodies of water yet by asking that question. We're so far away from seeing that we are all connected, and that as a collective, I think we are a giant mixed bag of things. But within that, there is a story. And I think that we are a living story that water is reading and writing. And right now, the people who are writing the story with love, I think there's a few more of us actually than we think there are. And that the people that are in pain so often just need a little more love and tolerance. And that one of the things that I think that water sees about us as humans is that it doesn't just see us as humans, it sees us as itself. And I think if we turn it on ourselves and look inward at the streams and rivers and tributaries and waterfalls that we are. So when I say to children, if your skin was invisible and your organs were see-through, what would you look like? They say we'd be rivers, we'd be streams, we'd be water. We're only a cut away from leaking. So when we separate ourselves all out into seeing ourselves as like this, oh God, the state of the world is so bad. Well, that's the world we're on. What about the world we're in? Turn inward and see, look, what's happening in the world that we're inside right now? And how does that look? And how does that feel? And you can change that one with one change of perception. The water within you isn't judging you. It is loving you. It is seeing you already as your highest expression. The hardest part of being in this body is all of the conditioning, the quote-unquote programming that we've had, all of the stuff that makes us feel less than. But that's not how water sees us. I don't think water is looking at us and thinking, oh, you guys have just done the worst job ever, just this, that, and blah, blah, blah. Because how are we ever going to learn to love if all we feel is judged? We have to have something out there that knows that it sees our highest potential even when we don't. And so the fact that water doesn't resonate, does not design through anger or frustration, to me suggests that water just does not resonate at that lower frequency. We don't give the ice, the water outside of us, the world of water that we live upon, anywhere near the amount of credit it deserves for being able to change things. It is staring us right in the face every day, in the air that we breathe. We go along thinking that it is humans that are going to be the ones that need to make the change, that need to change the world, for all these things. Yes, it is important that we do make changes, but the most important thing is that we begin with ourselves, because that's the place where everything changes around us. When I've worked with egg albumin, this is like, what has that got anything to do with it? But I was thinking, what would be the most informed water? And I thought it would be amniotic fluid. And since I can't chase pregnant ladies around in the hope that their waters are going to break, I wanted to think, eggs. Eggs are a house of life. So the albumin is when you crack an egg, a very thin layer of saliva-like fluid goes down into the dish, and it's not the gloopy gelatinous part. When you freeze that thin saliva-like part, in free-range fresh eggs, we can identify 6 patterns that I've named. 2 of them are more rudimentary than the other 4. With caged hen eggs, we only see 2 of the rudimentary patterns form, not the complex patterns. When you put a free-range egg in the middle of a whole batch of caged hen eggs, and you leave them side by side all together overnight, and you then do the crystallography, what I've come to see after many tests doing this now is that the free-range egg that is healthy and well and fresh, that free-range egg, its crystallography doesn't change. It's still incredibly beautiful, even though it was surrounded by what some people term as bad eggs. But here's the really great thing. There's healing by proximity. The caged hen eggs, which have consistently shown really poor patterning, and this isn't about me projecting consciousness or anything, this is just what they do. The ones that were the closest to the free-range egg all improved so significantly that they could be mistaken as free-range eggs. The ones further away improved, but not as much. So if you then bring that into what it is to be a person, if you begin healing yourself, you naturally heal your environment. And to honor someone who wrote something in my book, he said that the water molecule will always heal itself before it heals its environment. And that is just the same as us, as we are the potential to change the world around us. And just being able to see this, water is a divine mirror. We just look in the mirror and It's like our islands is 99% water. We are literally looking into water whenever we look at ourselves, whenever we look at somebody else. We are seeing a body of water that is representing our spirit, our life. So, although that might be hard for some people to like really step into, I think it's an easy option for many of us to consider that, even just to know that water isn't judging us. What we do is actually up to us. But ultimately, it's our relationship with the water within us that will impact the water around us and all bodies of water around us. And that's our gift.
That is a beautiful, poetic way to end this unfolding story that you are a part of, that you are leading in many ways, Veda. And I just wanted to honor you for being the living example of what happens when an artist decides to go out on a limb and experiment with science, because you are merging those two in such a beautiful and coherent way. And I am so excited to continue learning from you and seeing where this research goes, supporting you along the way. And I think we just scratched the surface in this episode, and you are always welcome to come back for more deep dives into the world of water and any other thing that resurfaces in this research and finding of information that we are a part of. So I appreciate you so much.
Oh, I received that with lots of love. Thank you.
Much love.